Today, we are going to talk about God's love. And I want to frame it more in, like, not only God's love, but the Father's love. And to do that, I think it's important to kind of establish a couple things. Like, why, right? Why is this important to look at? You know, we all know God's love, right? And maybe some of us have experienced God's love. But why, right? Why is it important that I think for us to look at it? Well, the person I think of, and excuse me because if you've been at other retreats, and if I'm going to use the same anecdotes or stories, bear with me. But I think the reason why I think it's important to look at this concept of the Father's love, God the Father's love for us, is because of this one psychologist named Dr. Harry Harlow. Now, if you don't know who he is, he's, I guess you could call him the grandfather or godfather of attachment style parenting. And what that means was up until, I think it was like the 40s, the parenting sort of suggestion by the experts at that time was not to nurture your child. Was actually to kind of be hard on them, right? And so to kind of withhold love. And maybe, because during that time, it was a time of war, right? So like you can't have a bunch of sensitive soldiers running around, right? And productivity can't have a bunch of sensitive people, right? So they thought, okay, you gotta be harsh, you gotta be cold, and you can't coddle them, otherwise you're gonna enable them. So this guy comes along, Dr. Harry Harlow, and what he does is he revolutionizes how we parent. And so his thing it's actually important to nurture your kids. It is actually important to be affectionate with your kids. It is really important to reassure and constantly provide a loving space for your kids. And if you don't know him, if you've ever taken like basic or intro to psych, you might have heard about him because he was also the guy that did these controversial studies on monkeys. And it's really horrific. Like, they have monkeys basically in cages. And so, anyways, so what's interesting about him is he's known as Dr. Love, right? But in his personal life, he is actually on the far end of being someone that's loving. And so his biographers, in one of his biographies, they mentioned that he's been married 3 times. And each marriage ended in acrimony. And with each child that he has from each marriage, it's estranged, right? There's no relationship. And, I remember reading one of the, questions that the biographer had for one of his kids. It's like, what's your earliest memories of your dad? And he's like, the only memory I have of my dad, Dr. Love, the guy that's all about nurturing and being there and being present in your child's life, was being gone. He was always at work and left everything for his mom to take care of. So he would just put it all on his wives, basically. And so it's so ironic, right? And it's so, confusing. Like, how can a guy, who built his academic life and became so famous and was able to revolutionize how we parent, how can someone, academically, with anecdotes and be aware of the consequences, be someone that's on the other side in his own personal life? Right? It's kind of confusing. Like, how is that even possible? And I bring that up because I wonder, for a lot of us as Christians, we can be the same way. Right? We can describe God's love, we can theologically break it down, we can capture the nuance and the lexicon of the word agape compared to other words, phileo and eros and all that. We could break it down, right? And yet we could be so unloving at the same time. How is it that we can easily talk about being kind and forgiving and yet be so angry towards other people, right? And so it's quite a contradiction. And I bring that up because I, at times, can struggle with that. The worst if any of you lead Bible studies or, prep sermons, the worst is I'm doing a word study, I'm prepping my sermon, or I'm prepping a workshop, I'm being kind, and then when my kids come in or my wife comes in, they go, hey, what are you doing? Can't you see I'm working? I'm working on this study on the word kindness, right? I'm doing this word study on patience, right? And you guys are messing everything up, right? And it's so ironic. It happens so often. And maybe for some of us, we have been hurt by that contradiction. You see your parents being church leaders or some kind of person that's, that's so kind and so good to everyone else, but yet be the opposite towards you at home. And so for the longest time, I struggled. Right? For the longest time, I was the dad that was kind of frustrated with my kids. And then I also was the impatient husband to my wife. Come on, get it together. We got to be at church. How does it look if we as a pastoral family shows up to our church late? How does that look, right? I would be so frustrated. And at some point I realized, I'm looking around, I'm like, man, what's going on with me? It's like, how can I be such an easygoing guy, enjoy life, and love and know that I'm loved by God, and I could describe how that love is, but yet not be able to do that in my own personal life? It was a struggle. It was awkward. It was hard. And so that really was at one point in early in our marriage, it was a struggle, right? Because when my wife really needed me to be understanding, I just wasn't at the capacity to do that. And a lot of that wasn't my wife's fault, wasn't my kids' fault, but I think it had to do with my understanding of God's love. You see, I don't know about you, but even though I was a pastor for so many years, I think for the longest time, I thought it was something that had to be earned. Even though I say we're saved by grace. But then in the back of my mind, I think I'm thinking I have to be a certain way to keep that grace or to have that grace. And I think because of that little tension, I think that's why we find ourselves confused at certain times. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a passage that is very, very, very familiar. And we're going to look in this passage a parable that is going to show us why. Why is it that we struggle to be loving, right? And why is it that it's something that we, underestimate? But a lot of that is going to reveal and point to some false assumptions that we make, that we're going to see two brothers make in this story. So if you have your Bibles, turn with me to Luke 15. And whoops, I forgot the remote. And then we need to be downstairs by 2:30, is it? You're okay? Okay. And then is there a worship song after this? Yes, there is? Okay. I'll just be, so I'll be done by 3:30. Okay. Tell my life story. And then I was 10 years old. All right, next thing, sorry. Let me get my mouth guard on now and get my CPAP machine. You guys know what that is. My blood monitor. Okay, almost there. Okay, so actually, I realized before we look at this very, very, very familiar parable, let me kind of go over the context of what's going on here, just so we're all on the same page and understand, why is Jesus even sharing this parable, right? So if you look at the very beginning of Luke 15, you're going to see that, it kind of sets up the stage. And it says, and now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him. So that shows us who is in the situation and who they were, what their background was. So in our context, just think of it this way. These are the people that your parents would not want to see you around. Those people, all right? The people that might, be a bad influence on you. Maybe for some of you, these are the kind of people that, their GPAs are only like an A minus, right? And it brings your GPA down to an A minus. It's terrible. It's horrible. It's terrible. They only go to regular UCs, not Ivy Leagues, right? Because if you hang out with them long enough, you'll end up being homeless, right? Homeless. Did your parents do that? Did any of you have that growing up? I don't know why. My mom always used to lecture me like, you're going to be homeless. I'm like, huh? Why? Why, Mom? That's how and she'd say, oh, it's because of your room. It's so messy. Right? Like, what? What does messy room equal? I don't get it. And so these are the kind of people that your parents would not feel comfortable with. Maybe these are certain people that you would not be comfortable with. But the nuance of that is, maybe we're not comfortable with the decisions that they have made in their life. And maybe we're also just not comfortable with them because of the lifestyle that they have, right? And so, there's a lot more to go into, but that's the scene, right? So, verse 2 says, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbling, these are the religious leaders, right? They grumbled, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. What they're really saying is, look at Jesus. One part of it is like, if he was really God, he would not allow these people to be around him because of who they are, right? Because of their past mistakes, because of the decisions that they have made with their life. I realize I'm not even using this, so thank you. And so, so that's one part of what they're saying, and another part of them is they're saying these people don't deserve our grace. These people do not deserve God's love. What they're also saying is we deserve God's love, right? In some ways, what they're also saying is God's love is limited to just a certain group of people. And so you see what they're saying to Jesus? And so that's why Jesus then breaks into this parable to explain not only who he is, but who he loves. Right? And so it starts with, two parables that if you look at it, it's material things that were lost. The sheep that was lost. The coin that was lost. But now he breaks it into what is most precious to God. It's not things, it's not objects, but it's us. It's our relationship with him. So then he starts with the story. Again, he starts with like this younger son, right? And the younger son basically goes to the father and says, hey, Dad, give me my share of the money, right? Give me my inheritance. And so basically he's saying, Dad, supposedly, back then they break it apart by the oldest gets 70%, younger one gets 30%. So Dad, give me my 30%, right? Now, both the tax collectors, sinners, and the religious leaders, both when they're probably hearing the story, this part of the story, they're probably like, oh my gosh, they're both in agreement. They're like, oh, how entitled, right, this guy would be, right? And so, so they're kind of like, Jesus is building up his plot here. And so then the younger son says this, right? And then to everyone's complete shock and surprise, the father actually goes out and gives him the 30%. Now, back then, unlike now, like, I don't know if you do this, but like, wow, it's like we could do everything with our phones, even deposit checks. Like, wow, that was like to me, that was almost as big of a game changer as getting navigation. I mean, it's huge. Now you don't have to go and you don't have to save your checks, you don't have to save your cash, and then hope you don't forget, right? And so back then, it's not like he would go to the ATM or just, write a check. He probably had to go sell off certain cows. He probably had to go sell off certain goats. He probably had to sell some houses. He probably had to let some people go. And so this could have taken like months. But the effort and the work just to do that because someone says, I want my 30%. Now, the other thing that's important to recognize is, what is the younger son saying to the father? And this gives us a clue to one of his false assumptions, right? What is the younger son saying to the father then when he says, give me my share, give me my 30%? He's saying, I don't care if you live or if you die. I don't care about you. I only care about what you have. You catch that? How would you like it if someone says, hey, how's it going? It's been so, yeah. Can you give me, like, your car, right? Can you just give me this, right? So what the son is also showing here is what he places a higher value in. Not the father, but his things. You know anyone that treats you that way? They only talk to you when they need something. They only interact with you when you have something that's good that they want. How does that make you feel? Doesn't feel that good, right? And so here, this is the situation with the younger son saying to the father. It says a lot about how he sees his father. He's less than. The value of the father is less than his money, right? And so he goes off, lives in wild living, right? We can assume he partied, went to Vegas, bought a nice condo over there, and blew all his money away. And before he knew it, he was out of money, out of friends, and stuck feeding pigs. It was so bad that what the pigs were eating was better than what he ate. And culturally speaking, as a Israelite, as a Jew, he's touching pigs. That's a huge no-no, right? So he's lost so much, even his dignity. And so it says that he gets to a place where he realizes, like, whoa, wait a minute. My dad, he's a good dad, right? He's a good dad. Now, you pick up another false assumption of his in his thinking here. He says, I know I have a good dad, so let me go back to him and be his son again, or be his servant again. I'll be his servant. So what he's saying there is, he knows how the father operates. He thinks the way to get back into the father's grace is to earn his way. You see that? You catch that? And so then he has this incredible speech rehearsed. If you have the time, just go back and reread this whole thing. You'll see he has this really long-winded speech. And it's interesting because the writer writes out the whole entire speech. Because what we're going to see in just a moment is he starts to go into his speech, but then the father cuts him off. Right? And what does that say? So let's pick up in verse 20. And it says, and he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. Notice what it doesn't say. This father saw him from a distance and was filled with anger. Notice it doesn't say that. It doesn't say the father said to his servants, God, I knew it. Right? But what does it say and what does it show us? He felt compassion. Right? And again, I think the translation of compassion doesn't really capture sort of the nuance and the essence of this compassion. But it's sometimes we read compassion, the word compassion, we think, oh, poor little cute dog that's kind of hungry. Oh, I don't know if you guys make that sound when you look at cute dogs. But he doesn't, that's one level of compassion. If you ever have kids, right? And if you're not thinking about having kids, this is the only reason why you should have kids, so you can have that feeling, okay? Not for marriage, not for love, not for, just to have that feeling. I'm just kidding, by the way. But, if you ever have kids and you see them suffer or you see them get hurt, it's like compassion doesn't even capture that feeling that you have. It's painful, right? It's painful. You feel what they feel and worse. Right? And that's what the father is feeling when he sees his son come back. He sees what his son has been through. He sees the shame that he's lived with. He sees the guilt. He also sees probably his confusion on how to manage all those emotions. But he also sees that his son has been alone. And so he runs after him. Again, it doesn't say he saw his son, and because the son was so great, he ran after him, right? But it says, because of what the father saw. So then it says, and the son said to him, now he's going into his speech, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So again, he's going to his speech here. But if you read it carefully, you'll see the father cuts him off. Why does the writer want us to see that? Well, maybe he wants us to see that because, I don't know about you, but sometimes that speech that he gives, Father, I have sinned against you, I have wronged you, I am no longer worthy to be called your servant. I don't know about you, but I make that prayer and that speech to God all the time. Like, darn it. God, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I lash out? Oh, God. Father, you know me. I've sinned. We all make that same speech. And I don't know about you, but I think for me, I think sometimes we make that speech because we really want God to bless us. We're saying that because we don't want anything bad to happen to us. We really just are afraid of losing his love, maybe, in a deeper psychological and subconscious way, right? And so we do that, right? We do that. So in our minds, we think if I could just make the right speech, then God will bless me. If I just can say it the right way, I won't lose my job. All right, if I could just say it the right way, then nothing worse will happen. So you see, there's something, it's humble, but there's also a subtle controllingness there. I say this, you do this for me because of what I did to deserve it. Does that make sense? So anyways, so the father runs in, says to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was dead to me. He was dead in my relationship with him, and is alive again. He's come back. He's come back to engage, no matter how imperfectly he is, but to engage in this relationship again. He was lost and is found, and they began to celebrate. It is so interesting, right, when you look at why they're celebrating. This is the kind of celebration that you do if someone comes home from being a war hero. You notice that? This is the kind of celebration that you do when someone has done something really important in their life. But they have the celebration. Why? Because he's come home. He's come back to the Father, right? Even though there's a lot of misunderstanding of what the Father wants. But to the Father, all he wants is the Son to be home, right? And he had a party because of that. So next part is verse 25. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed a fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. Poor guy. He's been working, right? And then he's like, what's that sound? It's like, he's probably thinking like, oh, I know it's my brother. Oh man, it's so unfair. He's always, he's the, what's it they call it? What's that cliche? The squeaky wheel, what's that cliche? What's it? The squeaky wheel gets all the attention. Gets the oil. That's right. Yeah. So the one that doesn't do anything, but they just know how to go be all dramatic, get all the attention, right? That's what people used to say to me. That's why I know that cliche. I'm just kidding. I'm the silent one. Doesn't mean it's a good thing. I'm the silent one, and I brew. But anyway, so he's angry, right? He's angry. Basically, for him, it's like coming home. I'm a car guy, okay? So he comes home, And then maybe his dad had saved this Bugatti in the back storage, or he's thinking, I got the Bugatti in the back, and when I get my 4.8 GPA, when I get my law degree, my doctor's degree, my medicine degree, and my Vietnamese expert language degree, and all that stuff, and have a IPO successful company, I'm going to get that Bugatti, right? And instead, he comes home, and then he sees his younger brother, who did nothing to deserve it, drive off in it. Would that hurt? I think it would, right? And so, so verse 29, but he was angry and refused to go in. All right, so he's angry. He's angry. Why? Because the thing that he wanted, right, he did not get. But that also reveals something. There's some false thinking and false assumption and false understanding that he has of God. The fact that he's angry that he doesn't get what he wants, that he knows he deserves, shows that maybe, just maybe, he values the thing over the relationship with the Father as well. And you're going to see that come out in his speech to his father, his conversation. And so he doesn't go in. He doesn't go in. Notice the younger son ran away, and the father ran out to him. And now this son doesn't go in. He stays away. So you see some very overlapping things going on here. And then in verse 28, but he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. Notice what it shows what the father's doing here. Younger son, he runs out to him. Now the older son is angry and bitter. He runs out to him. But he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat. He's probably saying, like, you didn't even give me an entry-level, super exotic car like an Aston Martin, But notice he doesn't say, you never gave me this so I could just know that you approved of me. But what's he say? That I might celebrate with my friends. What's that show? It shows that he's bitter that he's not getting the thing that belongs to his father for himself to enjoy it with him and his friends. Who's the higher priority here? Who's the higher value here? His friends, him. So you see that? You catch that? So he's saying, your thing is more important to me than you, right? Now, the younger son, his strategy was just go up to the dad and was all bold and give me that, right? And the dad gives it to him. The older son has a different way. His way is what? To earn it, to show that he deserves it. But really, the thing that he wants most is not the father's love, but the father's things. You catch that? And I think we do the same. I do the same. If I could just read the Bible every day, if I could just be nice, then good things will come. I think we all articulate that at some level, right? But if we do, then maybe that just shows how we see God the Father. Not as a person, but maybe as a genie. That means we also place a higher value in the gift than the gift giver, right? And so, but when the son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed a fattened calf for him. And he said to him, son, you are always with me. So he's saying, look, you are always with me. We are always together. Isn't that enough? Aren't I more important than the things that I have? Aren't I greater in value in the thing that you take from me that is great today and will be old the next day? Aren't I a greater value? So you see what the father is saying to him in that little sentence there? And then he says, all that is mine is yours. He's basically saying, look, if you wanted that fattened calf, you could have had it. We got 20,000 more, right? But you were so fixated on your own system of wanting to earn my love, wanting to earn my things, that you lost track of what was truly valuable, which is me. Again, you wouldn't like it if someone only talks to you, because they need something. How would I like it if, my kids, when I come home, they have a palm leaf. Oh, ba, oi, ba, ba, ba. I don't know how you compliment your dad in Vietnamese, like yoi wa, ba, đẹp trai quá, right? Ba, hắc say wa, right? I don't know, but how would I like it if they said all that, and then they're like, can you get the keys to the car? I'm like, what? So that's the only reason why they say something nice to me. And so it was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this, your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. So real quick, a couple of things. This story shows us some false assumptions that the two brothers had, right? One of them is they place a higher value in the father's things than over the father himself. They didn't care about him. Just give me my stuff. How come I don't get my stuff? I earned it. It shows a lack of their sense of understanding God's value. The other thing is then they thought of what they needed to do to earn those things, which was to work their way in. But you look at what the father does in response. He comes running out to them. He comes running out to them. He just wants them home. He just wants them back. He just wants them to be with him. You know what that shows? That shows what the Father values, is us in our relationship. And not only that, but he brings us in, covers us, protects us, shields us, loves us. Now, I think sometimes we kind of get this question stuck in our head, right? Like, if that's how we live our faith, won't that make us lazy? Right? Won't that make you lazy? If a child had that kind of relationship with the parent? I mean, yes and no. I mean, you could say so. But what's interesting is, I should cite this study, but there was a study that compared workers that were like contractors and tenure. And they found, maybe in the first few months, the contract workers outperformed the tenure workers. But over a year, 2 years, the tenure people actually overperform big time than the contract workers. Why? I don't know if you've ever been a contract worker and that really wants to stay in that company. It's stressful. So you overwork, you don't sleep well, you get stressed out, you get anxious, and then because of that, then your productivity suffers. The tenure, they are safe. They're free to grow, they're free to learn from their mistakes. Now, if I were to compare, if I had my daughter, and let's say I was so rich I had a servant, which that's not the case, but let's say I had a servant. I asked both of them to go wash my two cars, my Bugatti and my Aston Martin, right? Now, we might assume, let's say I'm really, good to my daughter, right? And I'm just a good contract boss. Between the two, you might think, oh, okay, obviously the contract worker will do a better job, which that might be true. But what if I had such a great relationship with my daughter? What if she knew my love, and she knew how proactive I was, and she knew how she was always safe with me, how I would pursue her, I would never stop looking after her, I would never stop loving her, right? Let's say she really knew that, and she really saw what I did to love her. I really think she will outperform my servant, who is like, oh boy, I better wash this correctly, right? Or maybe they'll do bare minimum. of what's required on the contract. So I think my daughter will outperform this if I were to write a paper in this. And so I think as we come to a close, I think maybe one thing that we should consider is, how do we approach God? How do we see God the Father? Do we place a higher value on the things that he gives us? And if we do you think maybe we're shortchanging God, but maybe we're also shortchanging ourselves? I mean, think about it, right? It's a very abstract thing to consider. But if you really sit to really, really, really meditate on it, that there is a God out there in this universe that loves you so much, that wants you to know him not as a powerful God figure being, which that is there. There's pecking order, of course. There's food chain. There's that for sure. But he wants you to look at him as a loving Father. And he's willing to do whatever it takes, to the point where he sends his son, not his servant, to die on the cross. Not his deadbeat son either, right? He doesn't have a deadbeat son, but he sends his only son, his favorite son, to die on the cross for you and I. So, something to consider as you look at how God is and how you see God.